They say character is revealed not when the world is watching, but when no one is. A man's true worth isn't measured by wealth or rank, but by the choices he makes in quiet moments. This is the story of Jack Miller, a veteran, a father, and a man who chose kindness even when mocked for it. One simple act, fixing a stranger's truck, would change his life forever. Stay with me, and let's uncover how a broken road led to honor, redemption, and a legacy of compassion that still inspires today. Don't forget to follow, like, and share if you believe kindness still matters. They say life can change in an instant, and for Jack Miller, that truth had been written across every chapter of his journey. At 34, he stood at a crossroads between grief and survival, between the soldier he once was and the single father he had become. The quiet town on the outskirts of Georgia didn't know the battles Jack carried inside. They only saw a man fixing broken engines and hauling delivery trucks to keep a roof over his son's head. Jack's story began years earlier in uniform. He had once been Staff Sergeant Miller of the 3rd Infantry Division, a heavy-duty truck technician who could keep a convoy moving through the harshest terrain. In those days, his wife Sarah was his anchor, an adored math teacher who filled classrooms with warmth. They were high school sweethearts who married young, carefully planned their future, and rejoiced when Eli was born. But plans have a way of crumbling. When Sarah's fatigue turned out to be stage 4 cancer, their world unraveled. Jack fought beside her through 11 months of treatment, watching the woman he loved fade away while holding their infant son. When she was gone, the uniform no longer fit. Jack left the service with honor, but with a hole in his heart that no medal could fill. Civilian life was harsher than any battlefield. Without a degree, Jack's military skills meant little to employers who asked for certifications he didn't own. Rural Georgia was still limping from the recession, and jobs with benefits were rare. Jack scraped together work however he could, repairing farm machines, taking delivery runs for the hardware store, helping at a friend's auto shop when they were overwhelmed. It was enough to survive, but never enough to breathe easy. Still, he wore a smile for Eli because a 4-year-old shouldn't carry the weight of unpaid bills or a leaking roof. One hot afternoon, Jack was driving home from Henderson's hardware store with Eli strapped in the back seat, sipping juice from his little cup. On the roadside, an old truck sat stranded, hood open, steam curling into the humid air. An elderly man in a mud-stained jacket struggled with the engine. Jack pulled over without hesitation. "I've got a toolkit in the trunk," he offered. The man only nodded, silent, his watchful eyes fixed on Jack as though measuring something deeper than mechanical skill. Jack crouched under the hood, diagnosing corroded battery terminals and a timing issue. His hands worked with calm precision. This was muscle memory, honed from years in the military. Eli watched from the car seat, his wide eyes shining with admiration. To the boy, his father looked like a superhero who could make broken things whole again. That look alone was worth more than any paycheck. As Jack worked, a familiar voice intruded. His neighbor, Mr. McCarty, strolled by with a smirk. "Instead of fixing your leaking pipes, you're out here repairing trucks for free. That farmer won't pay you a dime." McCarty never missed a chance to mock him, bitter because Jack had bought the house his nephew wanted. Jack didn't reply. He just tightened a bolt, shoulders squared against the sting of ridicule. After nearly 40 minutes, the engine coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. The old man closed the hood with deliberate care. He spoke only one sentence. "You didn't ask my name, but I won't forget yours." Then he climbed into the truck and drove away, leaving Jack in the fading sunlight with grease-stained hands and a puzzled expression. That night, after tucking Eli into bed, Jack sat at the kitchen table beneath the dim bulb, sorting through overdue bills. The electricity notice glared at him. Property taxes loomed. Rain leaked through the roof, threatening to worsen with the coming storms. He thought about calling at his parents in Ohio for a loan, but pride stopped him. They had already shouldered funeral expenses for Sarah. At 34, he believed he should stand on his own, no matter how shaky that footing felt. As crickets sang outside and highway traffic hummed in the distance, Jack drifted to sleep on the couch. His last memory before darkness claimed him was the sound of Eli's soft breathing in the next room, a reminder of why he kept fighting. What Jack couldn't know was that the simple kindness of fixing a stranger's truck had already set into motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The next morning began like any other, sunlight spilling weakly through the torn blinds of Jack's kitchen. He was spooning cereal into Eli's bowl, wiping milk from the boy's chin as laughter bubbled between them. For a brief moment, life felt almost normal, but that fragile sense of routine shattered with the blare of horns outside. "Daddy, someone's here," Eli called, eyes wide with excitement as he jumped from his chair. Jack set down the rag and moved to the window. His breath caught. 3 black SUVs sat in a perfect line in front of their small yard, engines humming. Men in plain clothes stepped out, but Jack recognized the posture instantly. Military. Even without uniforms, their alertness and precision couldn't be disguised. He stepped onto the porch, his heart racing. Across the street, curtains twitched. Neighbors peered through their windows, curiosity rising like smoke. And there was McCarty, standing on his porch pretending to check his mail, though his gaze never left the SUVs. The same man who had mocked Jack the day before now stood frozen, eyes narrowed in disbelief. One of the men approached, flashing credentials. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, sir, we're with high-ranking military personnel protection. Someone would like to meet you." Before Jack could form a reply, the rear door of the middle SUV opened. Out stepped a tall figure with silver-gray hair, moving with quiet authority. Though dressed in civilian clothes, his bearing was unmistakable. Jack's spine straightened on instinct, his body responding before his mind could catch up. Years of training returned in a heartbeat. Retired General Noah Caldwell, former commander in Afghanistan, advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a legend in military circles. Jack had seen his face in countless briefings, but never imagined he'd stand on his weather-worn porch. Caldwell smiled faintly. "At ease, Miller, and I'm retired now and no need for salutes." His voice was calm, steady, the kind that carried both weight and reassurance. Jack nodded, swallowing hard. Eli peeked from behind his father, small fingers gripping Jack's leg. The general's eyes softened. He crouched slightly, offering Eli a warm smile. "You must be Eli. Your dad helped me yesterday when my truck broke down." Eli blinked, solemn as only a 4-year-old could be. "Daddy fixes lots of things," he said simply. Caldwell chuckled. "I bet he does." Then his gaze shifted back to Jack. "May we speak privately?" Jack ushered Eli toward his room with a promise they wouldn't be long. When the door clicked shut, the atmosphere changed. The general's expression hardened, becoming all business. "What you did yesterday wasn't just fixing a truck," Caldwell began. His eyes studied Jack with surgical precision. "That vehicle carried confidential files, documents prepared for Congress about a fund for impoverished veterans. I was traveling incognito, gathering firsthand accounts of life after service. I wanted to know what it's really like for soldiers once the uniform comes off." Jack frowned, trying to grasp the weight of what he was hearing. "With all respect, sir, I'm not sure I understand." "For the past year," Caldwell explained, "I've been moving through towns like this one. No escorts, no press, just a man with a broken truck, testing the character of those I meet. Reports and statistics only tell us part of the story. I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes." He paused, letting the silence press in. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask for payment. You simply acted because it was the right thing to do. That's rare, Miller. Rarer than you might believe." The words hung in the air, heavier than any medal Jack had ever been given. He thought back to the mocking laugh of McCarty, to Eli's shining eyes as he watched his father work, to the stranger's departing words, "I won't forget your name." Now the meaning began to dawn on him. From the kitchen, Eli's muffled voice carried through the wall, humming to himself as he played. Jack clenched his jaw, grounding himself in the sound. "Sir," he said carefully, "I just did what anyone should have done." But Caldwell shook his head. "No, Miller, not anyone. That's why I'm here." As the general's words sank in, Jack realized that yesterday's small act of kindness had pulled back a curtain he never even knew existed. He was no longer just a struggling mechanic fixing old machines on back roads. He was being seen, truly seen, by a man who had once commanded armies. And the weight of that recognition was only beginning to reveal itself. Inside Jack's modest home, the air felt heavier than before, as if the walls themselves were straining to hold the weight of the conversation. Jack sat across from General Caldwell at the small kitchen table, its surface scarred with years of use. The general placed a thick envelope on the wood between them, sliding it forward as though it carried not just papers, but the turning point of a man's life. "Miller," Caldwell began, his voice steady, "yesterday you didn't just repair a truck. You demonstrated something far rarer than technical skill. Character. That's why I'm here. I want to offer you something that could change your future, and Eli's too." Jack glanced at the envelope, but didn't touch it. His rough hands stayed folded on the table, knuckles tense. He was a man used to wrenches and grease, not opportunities dropped from the sky by retired generals. Caldwell leaned back, folding his arms. "For the past 18 months, I've been leading a congressional task force to examine veteran support services. On paper, the programs look strong. Reports and statistics tell one story. But in the towns, in homes like yours, I've seen the truth. Decorated veterans living on the edge, struggling to provide for their families despite years of service." He gestured around the cramped kitchen, the peeling paint, the faint drip of the faucet. "This is what I wanted Washington to see." Jack felt his stomach knot with embarrassment, but Caldwell raised a hand before he could speak. "Don't misunderstand. This isn't judgment. It's evidence. Proof that the system has failed men like you." He tapped the envelope. "That's why we're launching a new initiative, the Veteran Technical Corps, a nationwide program to harness the mechanical skills of veterans, to put men and women with your background into roles that matter, maintaining power grids, water systems, communications, the backbone of this country, Miller, work that keeps America running." Jack blinked, stunned. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm just a mechanic. I don't have the certifications." Caldwell cut him off firmly. "We can train skills. We can issue certifications. What we can't teach is character. You either have it or you don't. Yesterday, you proved you do." The words rang in Jack's ears. He thought of the years he'd struggled, the nights balancing bills by dim light, the humiliation of asking friends for side work, the guilt of not being able to give Eli the stability he deserved. And now, sitting across from a general he'd once only seen on screens, he was being told he was exactly the kind of man America needed. Caldwell opened the envelope, spreading documents across the table. Salary figures that dwarfed Jack's current income, a housing allowance, full medical coverage, tuition assistance for Eli. Each page looked like a dream written in black and white. Jack's breath caught as he read the numbers. "This is real?" he asked softly. "As real as it gets," Caldwell replied. "You'd start with 6 months of training in Atlanta, home on weekends. Afterward, we'll place you near Eli's close enough to raise your son without disruption. But it won't just be a job, it's a chance to serve again, this time with the recognition and stability you deserve." Jack stared at the paperwork, disbelief mingling with hope. He thought of Sarah, of the promise he'd made at her bedside to protect their son, to keep going no matter what. He thought of Eli playing in his room, unaware of the doors opening just a few feet away. Outside, the SUV still idled, drawing more eyes from the neighborhood. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open. McCarty stood stiff on his porch, feigning indifference, though his gaze never left Jack's yard. The man who had laughed at him yesterday now watched as uniformed precision surrounded his modest home. Jack rubbed his temples, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," Caldwell answered. "Take 48 hours. Think it over. But know this, opportunities like this don't come twice. Not because of luck, not because of politics, but because of who you are." He slid a business card across the table. A date, an address, a simple invitation wrapped in monumental possibility. Jack picked up the card, his calloused thumb running over the embossed letters. His hands trembled slightly. In them, he had once carried rifles, repaired convoys, held his dying wife's hand, and cradled his son. Now those same hands held the key to a new life. Caldwell stood, signaling the meeting's end. His presence seemed to fill the small kitchen, commanding respect without force. At the doorway, he turned back once more. "Miller, bring your tools. First day is a practical assessment. As the SUVs pulled away, Jack remained seated, staring at the envelope and the card. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. Yesterday he had been a struggling father, mocked by neighbors. Today he held the power to rewrite his family's future. For the first time in a long while, the weight on Jack's shoulders felt lighter. Not gone, but shifting into something else. Possibility. And yet, in the back of his mind, one question lingered. Could a simple act of kindness truly be enough to change everything? That evening, long after the black SUVs had disappeared down the quiet Georgia road, Jack sat at the same kitchen table where the envelope still lay open. His hands rested on the papers, but his mind wrestled with doubt. Numbers and promises looked good on the page, yet he wondered if it was too good to be true. Could he really trust that one act of kindness had turned into a long line? Or was it some strange dream he'd wake from at dawn? Eli padded into the room in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, are we moving?" His little voice was curious, not afraid, just seeking the certainty only a father could give. Jack lifted him onto his lap, holding him close. "Maybe, buddy. Would that be okay?" Eli thought hard, as only a 4-year-old can. "Will you still fix things?" Jack smiled, brushing his son's hair back. "Yeah, I'll still fix things. Just bigger ones. More important ones." Eli nodded, satisfied with the answer. "Then it's okay." His trust was simple, unshaken, and it steadied Jack more than any contract could. The decision didn't take 48 hours. By midnight, after Eli had drifted back to sleep, Jack picked up the phone and dialed the number on Caldwell's card. His voice was calm, resolute, as he told the regional office he was in. The reply came swift. An email with digital paperwork, forms to sign, instructions for the next steps. Jack read every line twice, his heart racing as he saw the words unfold before him. Salary, triple his current earnings. Housing allowance, enough to move into a safer neighborhood. Medical coverage for the first time since the military, real security. Tuition support for Eli's future. He signed with steady hands, feeling like each stroke of the pen was rewriting the script of their lives. The following week was a whirlwind. Jack packed their modest belongings into boxes, Eli's toys carefully wrapped, the faded photographs of Sarah, his trusty set of tools, the military medals tucked into a small wooden case. Years of struggle condensed into a few cardboard containers. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. On Sunday morning, they loaded the truck. Eli clutched his favorite stuffed animal, watching as his father carried the last box to the cab. The boy looked back at the small house with its peeling paint and leaky roof. "Are we leaving it forever?" he asked. Jack crouched, meeting his son's eyes. "We're not leaving the memories, bud, just the problems." As they pulled away, the neighborhood stirred. Curtains shifted. McCarty stood stiff on his porch again, arms folded, a storm of emotions crossing his face. Disbelief, resentment, something like grudging respect. He couldn't ignore what was happening, though his pride wouldn't let him admit it aloud. Later that week, word spread. Some neighbors claimed Jack had been recruited for a secret mission. Others whispered about government contracts. McCarty, unable to contain his curiosity, finally approached while Jack changed the oil on his truck. "Those were government vehicles," he said, not quite a question. Jack kept working, wiping his hands on a rag. "General Caldwell offered me a job." "Because you fixed his truck?" McCarty scoffed, but the edge in his voice was softer now. "I didn't fix his truck," Jack replied quietly. "I fixed a stranger's truck. Turns out who someone is doesn't matter nearly as much as what they need." McCarty shifted uncomfortably, recalling the mockery he had thrown just a day earlier. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally he muttered, "Well, good for you, I guess." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest he had ever come. Jack let it go. Some changes take time. He declined the interviews that followed, the television appearances the office offered. "I just fixed a truck," he said simply, not to be remembered, but because someone once fixed mine. He recalled the day in a far-off desert when his military vehicle had broken down near a remote village. A local mechanic had worked for hours in blistering heat, refusing payment, saying only, "I got him." A man who fixes things carries peace in his hands. That memory was the seed of everything Jack believed in. When they reached their new town, Jack and Eli stopped at a small diner for breakfast. On the wall hung a photograph taken only weeks before. Jack, Eli, and the three black SUVs parked behind them. Below the frame, an inscription read, "One father, one right action, one life lesson for the next generation." The owner of the diner, a Vietnam veteran himself, had requested the photo after hearing the story. "People need reminders," he told Jack. "That character still matters in this world." As Jack looked at the photo, Eli tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, are we really starting new?" Jack placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice steady and sure. "Yes, buddy, we're starting fresh. And this time, we've got help." For the first time in years, the horizon looked clear, not clouded by unpaid bills or leaking roofs. Jack wasn't just surviving anymore. He was stepping into something bigger, carrying his son with him toward a future built not on luck, but on a choice he had made without hesitation. To stop for a stranger and do the right thing. 1 year later, the man who had once struggled to keep food on the table and patch a leaking roof had become a cornerstone of something far greater. Jack Miller now stood at the front of a training hall, his hands steady on the lectern, as a group of fresh recruits, veterans like him, men and women searching for direction after military service, listened closely. His voice carried not just instruction, but conviction. The Veteran Technical Corps had grown beyond its pilot stage, expanding across the nation. What began as a fragile experiment under General Caldwell's leadership had become a thriving program, partnering with technical colleges and establishing apprenticeship opportunities in communities with high veteran populations. Jack was no longer just a participant. He was a trainer, a mentor, someone others looked to for guidance. His practical knowledge, combined with the quiet authority of lived experience, made him an anchor for those who felt lost. At home, life had transformed in ways he once thought impossible. Eli thrived in his new school, his teachers often remarking on his unusual maturity for a child so young. When asked by classmates what his father did for a living, Eli always replied with pride, "My dad makes good people." It was an answer that made Jack smile every time, simple yet profound, a truth only a child could capture so clearly. On Jack's desk at the training center sat two photographs. One was of General Caldwell, taken the day he had first walked into Jack's old kitchen and changed the course of his life. The other was new, Eli on his first day of kindergarten, standing proudly in front of their new home, his backpack nearly as big as his small frame. No leaky roof above him, no uncertainty hanging in the air, just stability, possibility, and the kind of future Jack had once feared he could never provide. Yet despite the progress, Jack never forgot where he came from. On weekends, he and Eli often returned to their old neighborhood. They brought groceries to Mrs. Keller, an elderly widow who lived alone. They mowed her lawn, fixed her porch steps, shared coffee at her kitchen table. Sometimes Jack even stopped by McCarty's house. Their conversations remained brief and stiff, but when McCarty's water heater broke, Jack repaired it without complaint. "Why do we help Mr. McCarty when he was mean to you?" Eli asked one afternoon as they drove home. Jack thought for a long moment before answering. "Because helping isn't about whether someone deserves it, buddy. It's about who we choose to be." That philosophy had carried him through the darkest years, and it became the compass by which he raised his son. Meanwhile, Jack's story spread further than he realized. It appeared in newsletters, on veteran forums, in quiet conversations among service members struggling to transition into civilian life. Some saw themselves in his struggle, skilled people overlooked by society, weighed down by loss, unsure of how to move forward. Emails began arriving, words of gratitude from men and women who felt renewed hope because of his example. Even General Caldwell, now serving as a senior advisor to the president on veteran affairs, continued to tell Jack's story in speeches before Congress. "We measure readiness in billions of dollars of equipment," the general said once. "But the true security of this nation rests in the hearts of individuals like Jack Miller, people who do what's right because it's right, not because there's something in it for them." As well, the Veteran Technical Corps model became a blueprint for other programs: healthcare, education, emergency management, all built on the same principle. Select people for their character first, then give them the training they need. It was a quiet revolution, one rooted in trust that integrity mattered more than credentials alone. Jack sometimes received unexpected reminders of his impact. That first Christmas in their new home, a card arrived in the mail. It was from McCarty. The message indicted was short but sincere. You showed me I was looking at the world all wrong. Thank you for that lesson. Jack kept it, not out of pride, but as proof that change, like kindness, was always possible. On warm evenings after Eli had gone to bed, Jack often sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, reflecting on the strange series of events that had brought him here. The broken-down truck, the silver-haired general, the chance that came not from asking, but from giving. He thought of Sarah, of the promise he had kept to her memory, and he thought of Eli, whose future now stretched open and wide. Sometimes he wondered how many others drove past their own moments of possibility every day, never knowing what might have been if they had only stopped to help. Perhaps that was the true lesson. Opportunity often disguises itself as inconvenience, and character is revealed in how we respond. If you've ever witnessed kindness mocked, only to see it rewarded in ways no one could predict, then you understand Jack Miller's legacy. A father, a veteran, a man who proved that helping without expectation can change not just one life, but many. And perhaps the greatest truth he left behind is this: character still matters. It always will.